ask a genuine question how it would be fraud. This isn't me like a gotcha moment. That's just like me being curious because
Cool. All right, I'm gonna go to the next individual. Only send a guest request if you do believe the Christian God exists. I actually just genuinely want to hear what people are hearing that.
Connected, baby.
Yo, what's up? How old are you?
42.
Yeah, do you believe the Christian God exists?
I do.
Why so?
Early, but Dustin, at the end of the day, they're leaving no doubt in the fourth quarter.
Hello?
Yeah.
Okay, nice. Why'd you kick him off? Because he didn't come up for the topic. I only add people up who do believe the Christian God exists. We're doing debates. Steven, thank you so much for the $1. Yeah, I actually am. I typically would do that one with a co-host though, because whatever topic I don't know as much, I always typically do with co-host. So like if a topic is specifically reliant on a co-host, well then it's obviously going to be less likely that I'm going to be able to do that because I rely on someone else being live, not just like myself. And plus I typically only have people up if I like really know them and I'm like comfortable with them. I've just, I'm done just like, platform people that then turn out to be fucking problematic. Yo, what's up, how old are you?
I'm gonna rape your girlfriend, you little bitch.
What the fuck is wrong with you? What the fuck is wrong with you? Please reflect on your life. I don't know why people like that are in here. Let me fucking block that person. Please, dude. Like, why does that person do that? Block.
And that's why, could I ask why you believe he doesn't exist?
Yeah. So if it just comes down to faith, well, then I could just have faith in any other god or any other religion. I don't know why I would just have faith in Christianity. And the reason why I don't believe is because I don't see sufficient evidence. And actually, I have reason to believe you wouldn't exist.
Do you believe, like, would you consider yourself an atheist or more agnostic?
Agnostic atheist. So agnostic just means like I just don't know that a god exists. All right.
Yeah.
And then in terms of atheist means I just don't believe the Christian God exists.
Gotcha. Yeah. So I think there's a couple different, it's hard because a lot of things do come down to personal, like life experiences and stuff like that too. But a lot of the convincing evidence for me would be a little bit more like historical. Like, do you believe that Jesus was a real person?
Mm-hmm.
And do you believe that Jesus?
Yeah, I do believe he was crucified.
Yeah.
I just don't believe resurrection.
You don't believe in the resurrection. So 110%, or if they were even a 1% skeptic, that they wouldn't die for something like that.
I think that plenty of people die for beliefs that are not true.
Okay. Which I guess is fair, but I guess
we have martyrs of other religions. Like, for example, I think it's Prophet Muhammad's grandchild was a martyr, right? We can reference plenty of individuals that are martyrs for different beliefs. That doesn't indicate it's necessarily true because
and they still stood by those beliefs. So I would think that if those people really didn't believe that or didn't see that at some point they would have given up on that belief if there was nobody that they, because if they were all in a group and they all got martyred together,
they can have that belief. It just doesn't mean it's accurate, right? Like we could have multiple different ways of looking at this. Push the hand art. Like I don't see one. This doesn't justify the religion is true over other types of religions. But secondly, we can look at it from a lens of there's no possible way that Christianity can be true based upon the fundamental commitments that exist within Christianity, right? Like you have a commitment towards God being perfect and flawless, right?
Yeah.
But you also have like this idea that the world we live in is not perfect, right? Like that there's sin that happens in this world. So how can you reconcile with the idea that God is perfect, right? And would only desire to create things in which are perfect, right? But we exist in an imperfect world. How can you reconcile that idea? Like, why would God choose to create?
I think the imperfection. I think the imperfection of humans almost justifies God more than if we were perfect. Because if we have a relationship in life that's not based on any trust or any accountability, then that relationship would be false, right? That would be a forced relationship. Like if I have a robot and I program it to be good with me or have no doubt, have no trust.
Jaron, think of it this way, right? God has free will. Do you think God has free will?
Yeah.
Okay, but he is perfect. So you can be perfect and still have free will. So God can create anything in which is logically possible. Being perfect while having free will means it's logically possible to be perfect and have free will. Therefore, God would only have to actualize a world in which had everything perfect within it. If God were to actualize a world that's imperfect, that like signifies that he's imperfect because he desired imperfection over perfection.
I think he desired creation, and he did create people.
Yeah, but if creation is necessarily imperfect, well then he wouldn't desire creation if he's perfect, because his state alone is already flawless. So why would he desire to go towards a flaw state when he already exists alone in a flawless state?
I think to create something that has the ability to choose imperfection is extremely important for those things or those people being, I guess, proving themselves in a way, right? So if you just created a perfect being, because even in the Bible, right, the angels were created perfect, but still given the opportunity to choose against God. So if you want to be for God and prove that you love God and prove that you believe in him, there has to be some proof, right? There has to be some challenges or some temptation, in my opinion, at least. Because if I had a relationship with no trust or no temptation, then how strong would that be if the answer was creation?
Does God desire imperfection?
I don't think he desires imperfection. I think he desires
then if God doesn't desire imperfection, well then God couldn't create a set of circumstances in which are imperfect.
I don't know how that's true, because if you're
that is absolutely true, because think about it this way. Yeah, if you are perfect, right, a perfect free throw shooter, you're never going to miss with respect to your intention to score.
So I think if you're perfect, so because you're saying God is perfect or isn't perfect because he created imperfection, but you're leaving out the point that God is all powerful. So if God is all powerful, because God doesn't sin, God doesn't make mistakes, but God can create whatever and whoever he wants. So if you create something with the ability to choose imperfection, that doesn't necessarily mean that you, as the creator, are imperfect. It actually would more show that you are more powerful.
No. Given that they choose imperfection, it would show that you're imperfect because you desired a set of circumstances that are imperfect.
You desired a set of...
If you have an imperfect desire, are you perfect or imperfect? You're flawed. You're flawed, right? Having a flawed desire is a flaw. We can't just act like that's not.
I don't know how that would be a flaw if you're all powerful.
How is it? What? To desire something flawed isn't a flaw?
But you're
what does it mean to have a flawed desire?
To create something that could choose flawed or flawless or have flaws, right?
Can God choose imperfection?
I would assume God has free will.
Does God always choose perfection?
Yes. So again,
God would never choose to create imperfection. If God always chooses perfection, God would never choose to create imperfection.
But he chose people to choose perfection or imperfection. So Adam and Eve...
I understand, but God is perfect and never would choose something imperfect, even though he has free will. So if God were to create beings that are perfect, they would never choose to do wrong because they're perfect.
See, and that's kind of... But they were influenced by another being who is immortal to choose imperfection. So
yeah, we're influenced, but we're influenced by plenty of actions, right? Like we are influenced by God under your perspective to engage in plenty of things. Like for example, right? You are influenced by God to eat food, right? God made your body in such a way in which you require food in order to survive.
So I guess the only thing that I would say is, because if your point is that God created beings that chose imperfection, that he's imperfect, the idea of imperfection didn't actually come from those people. It came from a third source, right? If you believe in the Bible, Lucifer was the one who influenced the people to choose wrong. So that wouldn't be God's fault, right?
Okay, but why does Lucifer exist? Why does Lucifer even have the desire to influence them in that type of way?
Because
that's an imperfect influence.
God would have created the angels to have some sort of free will.
I understand, but you're not understanding the point that in order to utilize your free will in a manner in which is flawed, you have to be flawed yourself already.
I do disagree with that, because
that makes no sense.
So if you'd go back, because again, you're arguing against with stuff for the Bible when you say you don't believe in the Bible, and that's okay. But if you read the Bible, right?
What does it mean to be flawed?
To be flawed, I guess that is the definition, right? Is to do something wrong.
Wait, so you don't? So are infants flawless?
That's a good point. I don't know the answer.
Under your view,
Personally,
it's not true. Under your view, they are born into sin.
I think they are born into sin because of the imperfection.
So
that
they're
Adam and
flawed.
Eve- I would
Okay, they're
say so
flawed before
because
they
of
even
the
did anything. So flawed isn't necessarily the fact that you're doing something wrong under your perspective. Flawed is the fact that you have the capacity to do wrong.
So my belief on that would be that people were perfect back in the garden, and with their choice, they would have messed up the gene pool, and that's why we now are in consequence of that decision back all the way back with the garden, is what I would say. So I would believe that people were born perfect at that time, and with sin entering in the world, now we are born imperfect.
Yeah, I'm just gonna let you know. One, that's totally incoherent. Two, right? You're just not addressing my argument at all. You're not addressing the fact that it is the case that if they are perfect, that means that they don't make mistakes. Okay? If they were born perfect, how could they have ever sinned?
So
That makes no sense. That how can you make a mistake if you're perfect?
So the reason I would say that is because the tree.
Maxine, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
The tree that they would have eaten from, right, was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So they didn't actually even have the ability to sin before they ate of the tree of good and evil, right? So if they,
I understand, but wouldn't it be a sin to engage in the original sin? So what caused them to engage in the sin?
the third party influence from Lucifer.
Yeah, so Lucifer was already imperfect.
Yes, he chose.
Okay, so how did Lucifer become imperfect?
I would say it would be the exact same thing, is that God would have had placeholders for the angels as well to be able to choose loyalty or disloyalty. So, because if
When was the first time in which they engaged in disloyalty?
when they left, or they when Lucifer tried to be in the place of God,
Okay, what made him engage in that action?
his own personal choice.
His own personal choice. Why does he choose that way if he's perfect? Isn't that flawed?
So I
Isn't
guess
that
that's
flawed? Isn't
really-
that not flawed? If it's a sin to do that, then how could it possibly be flawless? How could he be
think that's-
flawless?
That's the exact same thing, is that because clearly God has a pattern of creating safeguards to test loyalty, and I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing.
That
to
makes
test
no
loyalty.
sense to test loyalty if you're all not.
I think
What are you
it
talking
does.
about? Why are you how? Okay, if you already know everything that is going to happen, what's the reason you need to test someone? Testing is just so you can identify and isolate information that you could use.
I
If
think
you
it's
already
basically-
have the information, there's no reason for a test.
I think the test would be to prove loyalty, because again, if you create a robot,
God doesn't need you to prove something if he already knows.
clearly God wants us to make that choice for ourselves and not him making it for us, which I think ultimately shows the greater good that God is, right? Is
If
allowing-
we were flawless, we would make that choice regardless. I don't know what
Again,
your point is.
I think that you can be flawless and still have temptation to choose it, because just feeling tempted to do something isn't the sin. The sin is doing it, right?
Does God feel tempted to sin?
I wouldn't know the answer to that. I'd probably say
You
no.
don't know?
I would
No?
say
If it's no, then why can't God make us in such a way in which we're not tempted?
Sorry, I got a phone call. What'd you say?
If God doesn't have to be tempted in order to have free will, why do we?
Because we're his creation. I'm not God,
That
right?
just
So I
doesn't
can't
make any
answer
sense.
that.
Right? It doesn't make any sense. If he has free will, then it's logically possible for us to have free will in the same conditions.
So it may not make sense to you logically, but it does make sense coherently with what the Bible would say.
What does
right?
coherently mean if you're not referencing logic?
I'm saying it's accurate within what the Bible would set the standards for. So
So
though it
it's
doesn't
not
make-
logical. Do you agree it's not logical?
I would say it is logical because we're the creation, not the creator.
Okay, that doesn't change whether or not it's logically possible.
That an all perfect, all powerful being created people who
How
aren't
is there a
all
contradiction
powerful.
if you just change whether or not it's a human versus God? Right? We're talking
Because
logic
God-
right now. We're not talking about any other limitation.
So again, we're not, right? So if in logic standpoint, you have an all-powerful, all-knowing being who creates people who aren't all-powerful and aren't all-knowing. So why would I try to bring myself to that same mental spot? I can't. It's impossible in that logic. No?
No, so you're saying it's impossible for God to create beings in which are perfect?
I don't think it's impossible because, like I said, Adam and Eve
So
were
it's
perfect.
possible for God to create perfect beings.
Yes.
So God preferred imperfection over perfection?
No, he created people who had
No,
attempted.
so wait, God can create something perfect, but chooses to create something imperfect.
Yes. I think that's a great thing.
That's desiring imperfection over perfection. That's
I
a
think it's
contradiction. You want to know why that's a contradiction? Because imperfection by definition is flawed, which means it's less desirable than perfection.
Okay, so I
Clearly,
wanna-
perfection is more desirable than imperfection because it maintains no flaws.
I want to bring this point back just one more time, if I could, that temptation doesn't equal sin. So if God creates a perfect being but allows them to be tempted, that is not creating a flawed being. That's creating somebody who has free will. So the temptation.
No, that's just wrong. We already went over this. Remember, God already has free will and doesn't have temptation.
So again, I understand that, but then if he wants to create a person who truly is loyal to him, there has to be some sort of temptation in order, or some sort
No,
of
it doesn't.
test to prove loyalty.
Nope. You're presupposing that, right? And you're saying that it requires that logically speaking, but it doesn't require that logically speaking with God, which
Well, there
means
would
it's
be
not
no
a
other
logical
being
requirement.
like that.
Listen, it's not a logical necessity. If you don't require it with God, it's not a logical necessity because it's true, right? With God, it could be true otherwise. Logically
No,
speaking,
because I'm
there's
talking
no
about-
symmetry breaker.
There is, because I'm talking
No, there's
about
not.
relationship. You're talking about one person. In order to have a relationship, you have to have loyalty, and there has to be some sort of proof in that. God is one being; He's not two.
Well, then what you're not understanding is that God would never desire a relationship over no relationship then, because relationship is imperfect, while as no relationship is perfect.
I think relationship is challenging, and so relationship is trying, and relationship is loyalty. So I think to create people who would have some sort of temptation to prove loyalty is important.
Do you agree? No. Do you agree perfection is always more desirable than imperfection?
I would think so. Yes.
Okay. So if God already exists in a state of affairs in which are perfect, God exists alone, right? No relationship equals perfect. Why would God desire to go from that perfect state to an imperfect state in which he's in relationship?
I don't think God's in an imperfect state.
That's incoherent. We exist in an imperfect state currently. That's
Yeah.
incoherent. The state of affairs that exist when God exists alone, right, are perfect.
Yes.
The state of affairs in which God exists with human beings are imperfect.
It was
There's
perfect.
flaws that exist.
It was perfect.
You can
with
say whatever you
temptation.
want. You can say whatever you want. Perfection is more desirable than perfection that will be imperfect. I don't even understand how that's originally perfection, but still a less desirable state of affairs because it has some flaws within it rather than the state in which has zero flaws.
So
Okay, so
again,
it should, you would stay in the state of affairs that are always perfect, not the state of affairs that could be corrupted, right? Clearly, this is incoherent.
I'm getting a little bit confused on your point there, because
There shouldn't be anything confusing
Were
here.
Adam and Eve perfect or no? In your mind,
No,
why?
because they had the capacity to be imperfect.
So again, you're connecting temptation and the ability to sin with sin, and I'm not.
No, I'm saying, can God sin?
I would think so, but I don't have the correct
If
answer.
God can sin but chooses never to, I'm saying it should be the same conditions for Adam and Eve if they are
And it
perfect.
wasn't it? God, they were perfect and had the ability to choose sin, and they chose sin.
Yeah,
So they-
I understand, but they would
how
never
does that
choose
not-
sin if they are perfect. They would never choose sin because to choose sin means you're engaging in a flaw. If they are flawless, they can't engage in a flaw.
No, because again, Jesus, in my belief, who was perfect, was also tempted by Lucifer, and he denied that temptation and stayed perfect. So clearly,
Okay, there you go. So if it is the case that they're perfect, they would deny temptation then. If they would deny temptation if they're perfect, well then Adam and Eve, if they were perfect, would deny temptation.
and so they went into temptation because they had the ability to. And when they ate the fruit, that was
No,
the sin.
no, Jesus and God have the ability to, but they don't choose to. So that's just
Yeah.
wrong.
So they're perfect. So I don't understand. So if
I
being
understand.
tempted-
I understand. If Adam and Eve were perfect, they would respond the same as God and God did.
So Adam and Eve weren't perfect, but they were in a perfect state for however long they were in a perfect state, and then chose imperfection. So again, when Jesus before
Dude, I've already explained this multiple times. I don't know what's confusing about what I've explained.
because I think you're connecting with the fact that they did sin, that they were imperfect the whole time. And what I'm
Yes.
trying to say is before temptation, before you actually choose something wrong, you are perfect. And I think you're making that not make sense, but that makes tons of sense.
Okay,
Before
so
you
again,
choose the
even
bad
if you
thing-
accept that framing, it still does not make sense for God to create, as it is the case, he would go from a eternally perfect state to a not eternally perfect state. Does that make sense?
Yes, it actually makes a whole lot of sense.
Okay, so then why would God, an eternally perfect being, choose to go to a not eternally perfect state of affairs when God already exists in an eternally perfect state of affairs?
Because I think that it's a pretty special thing that God desires relationship.
Special? So God, what you're arguing here is that God desires an imperfect state of affairs over a perfect state of affairs, which is contradictory.
No, again,
That makes no sense.
God does not
It makes
desire.
no sense at all.
God didn't desire imperfection, but He desired real relationship.
Okay, well then God would have existed. Okay, when you say God desires real relationship, and then when you indicate that real relationship relies upon imperfection, that imperfection is logically necessary to occur if it is the case that there is a relationship, well then that just means that God would not desire relationship. God would desire to listen. God would desire to exist alone eternally, because that is eternal, right? That is eternal perfection. Now, if God desires entertainment, what you're indicating is that his state of affairs existing alone is not perfect, because there is something more desirable than his existence alone.
So relationship, I don't think desires imperfection, and that's what you said that I disagreed with. What I say is relationship, it needs some sort of trust factor to be real. Because if you don't have free will, relationship isn't real, right? And that's what I'm trying to say. I'm not saying relationship is imperfect, but I think relationship is full of free will and in some way built on trust, right? So for God to trust people, there has to be some sort of temptation. So they were created perfect with free will and the ability to become imperfect.
Can you restate my argument?
Your argument is that because relationship is imperfection, God would prefer to stay alone rather than create things that were imperfect.
Okay, because why?
Because with the creation of people, that would bring imperfection, which God wouldn't like.
Thank you so much. Listen, imperfection is always less desirable than perfection, right?
Why would you say imperfection is always more desirable than imperfection?
Why would I say perfection is always more desirable than imperfection?
I heard you wrong. Okay, yes, I agree with that.
Okay, well then why would God go from a perfect state of affairs eternally to an imperfect state of affairs eternally?
Because for some reason, God wanted to create beings that he could
wanted. There you go. Wanted indicates that you desire one thing over the other. What you're doing is you're contradicting yourself, because you're saying that God desires something in which is less desirable. What was less desirable by definition is an imperfect eternal state of affairs. Okay, so God would always choose to stay in the perfect eternal state of affairs over the imperfect eternal state of affairs, because he wants to be in the eternally perfect state of affairs over the imperfect state of affairs eternally.
Well,
by
the good
definition
thing is because God created people with the ability to choose, right? And so then I'm going to move on too, because with God creating us and us choosing imperfection, he then also provided us a way to live with him in an eternal state of affairs in perfection. So I think God's ultimate plan is still desire.
Jaron, that's incoherent. You wouldn't go from a perfect state of affairs to an imperfect state of affairs just to get back to a perfect state of affairs. You would just stay in the perfect states of affairs.
But what if you want relationship? If you
want relationship, oh my God, dude, we just went over this. God wouldn't want that state of affairs that's imperfect.
So God
it's not eternally okay. If it's not eternally perfect, God doesn't want it because he doesn't desire anything over something that is eternally perfect. Something that is eternally perfect is the most desirable state of affairs.
I agree. And that's why we have the ability to accept Jesus into our heart and go into an eternal state of affair, because we messed up the perfect state of affair. So, but then on the other side then, because I don't know if we're getting anywhere on this exact part of it, but
no, because you're not listening. This is not a difficult thing to understand. This is not, I see that you understand it, but you just don't want to accept it.
I just don't know what you would prefer me to accept, because again,
there's nothing. It's a contradiction. This is a blatant contradiction within your worldview.
I don't think so, because again, I'll just let me speak for 2 seconds. I'm not going to ramble on. Right? God created people who were perfect with the ability to choose imperfection. So God's clear ultimate desire would be all of us to stay in that perfect state of affair. Humans chose to go against that and chose sin. So then God gave us an ultimate ability to then still enter into the kingdom with a state of affair, right? A perfect state of affair. So I think all around, I don't see how that's a contradiction. I see how that's actually.
Oh my God, dude! I've explained that. This is the last time I'm going to explain this. Okay, listen. If God is already in an eternally perfect state of affairs, it's the most desirable state of affairs. You cannot tell me that there's a state that's more desirable. Why? Therefore, there would be no reason from God to move from point A, existing alone, to any other point, because it's already the most desirable state of affairs.
existing in a perfect state and then existing in a perfect state with people in relationship, I think is more.
In order to get to that perfect state, you said it was logically necessary to have imperfect things occur, meaning
No.
that it's eternally imperfect.
I didn't say
Okay.
that. I haven't said that.
What? Listen, if there are anything that happens within the internal state of affairs that are imperfect, it's eternally imperfect. Do you agree?
Say that one more time. I'm sorry.
If there's anything that's flawed that happens within an internal state of affairs, it's an imperfect eternal state of affairs.
Yes, I agree.
Okay. God always prefers perfect eternal states of affairs over imperfect states of eternal affairs.
Yes.
Okay. So given that God existing alone is a perfect eternal state of affairs, and God plus creation is a imperfect eternal state of affairs, God would never choose to go to the God plus creation because he always prefers an perfect eternal state of affairs over an imperfect eternal state of affairs.
Would you say that rationally it would be more desirable to have a perfect state of affairs with relationship rather than a perfect state of affairs alone?
No, because we're saying eternally it's imperfect. Listen, so something that is eternally perfect is always more desirable than something eternally imperfect.
Okay, yeah, I agree.
Okay, so again, the eternal state of affairs, God existing alone, perfect, flawless.
But then
right?
if you were to add
Eternal state of affairs with creation, imperfect. God wouldn't prefer imperfection over perfection. That's contradictory. There's no way you can walk yourself around this.
No, that's very true. I actually agree with that. But at the same time, too, would you say relationship needs, for it to be a real relationship, needs free will?
I don't know why you keep bringing up relationship. We've already indicated it's, under your view, it's logically necessary for the relationship to be eternally imperfect.
That's, again, I still don't, that's not true, because what I'm saying...
Okay, so it's logically possible for it to be eternally perfect? Well, then we would expect creation to be eternally perfect instead of eternally imperfect.
Which it was created as perfect.
You agree that creation is eternally imperfect?
Creation is internally... we chose for that.
Eternally.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
we chose
So
for that.
if it is, then we don't have a perfect God.
We do.
Because a perfect God would never create something eternally imperfect when it exists already prior to this, eternally perfect.
So again, we're kind of going in circles because
because this is a really basic thing that you've already conceded to that you just don't realize.
No,
you've
again,
already accepted every premise of the argument. The
I'm
conclusion
saying
of the logical conclusion of the argument is that your perfect God does not exist.
I think the logical conclusion of the argument is that you won't say temptation equals sin, or you won't say that temptation doesn't equal sin. Because that's what I'm saying. Because he created.
It doesn't matter. I already went through that. If it means sin, if it doesn't mean sin, the same thing is true. Where it's still the case that an eternally imperfect state of affairs is not more desirable than an eternally perfect state of affairs.
So
it's very simple. Very simple. What's so confusing about this?
What's confusing is that you won't say a relationship is more desirable than.
You can't have something more desirable than perfection. That's incoherent.
To say something, but something could be more desirable. No.
Oh, something can be more desirable than perfection?
I think you could have something perfect, and then you could have something perfect that you'd prefer. Yeah.
Really? Tell me.
So if I have two things that I love,
so perfection isn't the maximally great state of affairs?
Perfection is perfection, but to desire
is God maximally great?
Yes.
Okay, what's better or more preferable than something that's maximally great?
Relationship with other things that are great.
So God's not maximally great. What does it mean to be maximally great?
He is, but what I'm saying is...
He is, so what does it mean to be maximally great?
I don't have the definition for that, but
Most desirable state of affairs, correct?
I get, well, yeah, I would say, again, you're saying that as if, because here's the thing that you're not adding in there too. Biblically, God was never perfectly alone. I believe in the Trinity and I believe in angels and stuff too. So he created people.
So God's not perfect.
No, God is perfect. I don't understand why that would...
You just said God alone isn't perfect.
No, I said God hasn't eternally been alone, and then he created people, and now he's not alone. God has eternally had other things around him, other beings, and he chose to make people out of want, I guess, out of whatever he wanted out of us, out of the ability to have relationships. So it's not like God...
Jared, I'm sorry, but you're just a yapper, dude. I'm just going to be totally honest. I'm not trying to be rude or anything like that, but like I've pointed out to you a blatant contradiction. It is so hard to walk around that, and what you're doing is you're not acknowledging that because you want to continue to hold your view.
I don't agree with you there, and that's okay. I think we can say that we just don't agree because I think I understand what you're saying, and I'm putting a point, and I think you're not saying that point, and that's okay.
No, because we've already gone over. It is the most desirable state of affairs for God existing alone. Do you agree?
No. Oh, I guess
No?
it's hard. That's a hard answer because I don't know if God ever or God chose to just be completely alone. Because biblically, I don't.
Prior to creation prior to everything being created, did God exist alone?
No. Biblically, no.
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 So what else is eternal?
Angels.
Angels are eternal, so they weren't created by God.
No, I'm assuming they are created by God, but I couldn't.
Okay, so then they're not eternal.
No, they're. I would think that they're eternal because they live forever, but I don't know if they've always lived forever.
No, you're not understanding what eternal means. Always existed. If there's a time prior to them existing, they didn't always exist.
Gotcha. So then, no, I wouldn't say they're eternal. I thought eternal means could live forever, or could be alive for forever.
No.
Okay, yeah. So no, they're not eternal. I wouldn't assume so. But again, you're asking me a question I don't have the answer to. That's not a biblical thing. That would be me guessing.
Okay. So so then my point would then be is that before every creation, God existed alone.
I would have to logically say yes.
Okay. So in that state of affairs, if God is maximally great, you're saying in a maximally great state of affairs that there is a state of affairs that is more desirable than a maximally great state of affairs?
Yes, you can choose something even though
Incoherent. What does it mean to be maximally great?
I don't know the exact definition of maximally great.
Okay. The most desirable state of affairs?
Okay, so the most desirable state of affairs.
What does most mean?
Most would be, so I guess I wouldn't say then God was in the most desirable state of affairs because clearly God desired something else.
Oh, there we go. Lotus, thank you for the 18-month subscription. Thank you so much. So you're saying God existing alone, he is perfect,
Yeah.
but he's not the most desirable state of affairs?
I guess
His being is not most desirable?
he is most desirable, but he could desire what he wants to desire. I don't know why
That's incoherent. That's it. Is God existing alone the most desirable state of affairs?
I would say logically, because he created other beings, I'd probably say no. He clearly desired more. Doesn't mean he's not
There you
perfect.
go. Not maximally great. Not maximally great, not perfect. Because there's something more desirable than him existing alone.
What does maximally great mean then?
Yeah, most desirable.
Okay, so
Most desirable means it is there's nothing more desirable than it. That's what it means.
okay, so then I would say clearly God desired relationships, so I wouldn't say that he wouldn't be in the most perfect state because clearly he desired relationships.
Okay, so God isn't perfect.
See, again, you're taking the word by saying like, hey, God wants something, so that means he's not perfect. I don't understand how that's logically coherent.
Yeah, it is logically coherent because it is the case that, again, if it's perfect, it is the most desired state.
So to say a perfect thing wanted something means that they're not perfect. That doesn't make any sense.
It means that the only thing it could want is perfect, right?
I would think.
Okay,
so.
a perfect being entails that the only thing it would want is perfect, or especially if it's a creator.
If a perfect thing wanted a perfect relationship, desired a perfect relationship with other things, how does that make them less perfect?
They would be morally neutral to it, so it would be like random. Does that make sense? The reason why is because prior to all creation, they existed in an already perfect state. So if it's most desirable, and there are other most desirable states, because they're all the most desirable of equal value, that means that it would be random from God to go from one position to the other one, because they are the same in terms of how desirable they are. God's indifferent to them. Like if I were to say you want $10 or $10, you're going to be like, oh, I don't care. I will take either of them, right? Because they're both $10.
Sure.
What you're trying to say is that God existing alone is $9, right? And that there's some other state that exists that's $10. So God's not in the most desirable state.
I guess you're asking me to argue something that I don't have the answer to, but I would say my argument would be then, because I don't know, I don't exactly know, I wasn't there, but why couldn't there be $10 that look differently, and you say I'd prefer this $10 over this?
Because they're both $10. They're of equal value. We're assuming when we give the hypothetical, we can't give another qualifier that's different than the $10 because what we're assuming is that they're equivalent in value. If they're equivalent in value, we have to say that it's comparable to another thing in which they're equivalent in value.
So why couldn't God desire relationship with things and beings?
Equivalent in value to what he already has.
Exactly. Why couldn't he?
Because desire means that it's like more than the other one. Like, for example, if it was $10.01, you would desire $10.01 over $10.
So then I guess I'll stop using the word desire. I would just say then God chose relationship. I don't know if he desired it because I'm not him.
Why
right?
would he intentfully choose to do that?
because he's God and he can choose.
It would be
to do whatever
random,
he wants, right?
It would be random. Okay, well then you're saying that he desired. To
Not
explain
really.
explain the action, it would require a desire.
So because you're saying desire as if I'm God, because I don't know if the Bible clearly states that God
So
desired.
God didn't want to engage in that action.
God clearly wanted to.
There you go. Now there you go. There you go. That want means desire. Okay.
So choosing, I guess choosing something would mean you want it, right? But again, you're assuming that that would then take away its equal value to God's current state.
Yep.
I don't know.
Yeah,
that-
because you desire what you wanted more than what existed prior.
if you're choosing something of equal value, according to your logic, then that wouldn't be.
No, okay. Would you rather take $10 or $10?
I would think if I would choose $10.
Exactly. You don't pick a specific one because
But
it's the
again,
same value.
if one's green and one's blue and they're of same value, why couldn't I then choose the red one?
Because
if I
what
had
you're
to-
then saying is that the value that you derive out of the dollars is not solely defined by the level of money. You're defining it on some other quality.
Okay.
Okay. So what we're doing here in specific is it's not comparable. I already talked about this. It's not comparable because you're adding another qualifier value that the other one doesn't have. So they're not of equivalent value.
I think they
Does that make
still-
sense?
I think it makes sense what you're saying, but I think that they could still be of equivalent value and have different characteristics, right? So God being
Yeah,
alone,
they could have different characteristics, but you couldn't desire one of those characteristics like a net more than the other one
why?
because they're of the same value.
But if you
You
had one
can't
of
say,
them-
"Oh my fucking god, this is not a difficult I'm sorry, Jaron. What the fuck is wrong with you? If they are the same value, you can't desire one more than the other one. That's not a difficult concept.
But
okay?
if you have one
I
of
don't know
them
why
and
you're
don't
being
have
this
the other
dense.
one,
I
you
actually
go
don't.
to a-
I really don't understand why you're being this dense. Like,
I'm
are
not
you
being
actually
dense.
genuinely like having this conversation with me?
I-
That like
yeah.
you might desire something more than something that is equivalent in how much you desire it to another thing?
So if you have
That's just
something-
incoherent. You're saying it's more valuable and just as valuable at the same time.
No, it's just
What
different.
type of question are you asking me?
It's different. It's not more or less valuable, right? Because if I have something and I
Yes, it is. You're arguing it's more valuable.
don't think it's more valuable. It's just something that you can want. So that's why I think we're
Oh
disconnected.
my god, that's what it means.
Or I mean,
oh my
not
god,
something-
if you
sorry, I
want
want-
something
just
over
like
another
you
thing, that
want.
means you value it more than the other thing.
I meant to say choose, not want. Because if I currently have something and I choose,
Okay,
to
then
have
it's a
something
then it's a
else,
you would never intentfully choose to do that. It would be random.
but they're different, right? That's why it doesn't make any sense. Being alone and having a relationship. Are
I understand they're different, but the one is not more valuable than the other one, even if they're different, if it's equivalent in value.
I just don't agree with you in there. If you're alone and
What?
you choose to have relationship, that's a choice. Doesn't mean
That means
something
it's not
is more or
equivalent
less
in value. That means it's not equivalent in value if it's not random. What you're arguing is then that it's random. And that is not justified by your scripture.
Why isn't it justified by Scripture?
Because one is not more valuable than the other
Well,
one.
what's interesting is you're making me argue something with you that isn't actually justified by Scripture either. You're trying to have me argue the intent in the intent of a God that I don't get to actually see face to face. You know, so I'm doing all of this based off of what the little words we've been given because I don't think some of this stuff matters to God. I don't think God cares if we know His exact intentions or not. I think God cares if we want to have.
Dude, I honestly, your God doesn't care about things because he doesn't fucking exist. That's the point I'm making. And we've already gone through the argument. I gave you the contradiction, and all you've got left is cognitive dissonance. I'm sorry. It sounds like I'm like angry or something like that. But Jaron, it's because I know you're at the point where there's no fucking reasonable position, and like the only way that you can gravitate towards the view is if you utilize cognitive dissonance.
Cognitive dissonance meaning, I'm sorry, I don't know what that means.
Yeah, so like you're specifically not acknowledging the facts or like the reality, right? Specifically because you have a view that you want to continue holding on to. That's the way that I'm using cognitive dissonance in this context.
Well, I think you're bringing up good points, and so it's obviously not something that I haven't watched your stuff enough to hear this argument before and really like take it in, consider it, think about it.
I haven't done this topic in months, so.
Oh, gotcha. So, it is something that'll make me think, and I'll definitely go and look into it. I think I'm making sense, but I think in some ways I'm not making sense to you. So I'll have to chop it up, look it up, and maybe come back and request and talk again. So
Sure.
I appreciate the time, man.
Appreciate it. All right, everyone, I'm going to hit a restart. I'm going to try this topic one more time. If it doesn't work, I'm going to just probably go to a different one. I don't think it's the topic. I think it's literally just the following glitch. It's so fucking bad. We have 13K total views in 42 minutes. Typically, like what we'd expect if we actually have algorithm is that we would have just as many thousand as we do minutes, or it would be more thousands than minutes, right? If there's like actual push on the live. So Yeah. I'll be right back, everyone. He was a good sport though. Like I do think that like he's genuine enough to engage in the conversation. He just can't seek this right now because of the cognitive dissonance, and I think it's kind of sad. I really wish I could have got him to see it. But yeah, I'll be right back, everyone. Give me a second.
Oral tradition that's been passed off, as well as various historians that have written on the subject.
Do you think most historians and scholars believe that Jesus was resurrected?
No.
Okay, so then why do you take that as an account?
Yeah, because the Gospels write about the resurrection of Jesus, and it's also
Okay, what makes the Gospels reliable?
that they're pretty much as coherent with each other. You have Mark, you have Luke, and John that share similar, not exact, but similar stories. You have Paul as well later on that also shares similar stories about Jesus. That they all pretty much go
Yeah,
hand in
so
hand.
so you could say something shows a similar story, but that doesn't mean that it's accurate within its findings, right?
No,
Just
correct.
because different books within your Bible specifically claim that, right? So again, what gives them validity is what I'm asking in terms of making claims about resurrection.
Yeah, like I said, the book has a lot of things that go hand in hand with together. Not only that, we have historians used books for archaeological evidence to find sightings that people didn't know of before. So if they use it for
How does that justify its findings in terms of resurrection? Like we might say it can justify certain historic relics or things like that, but that doesn't mean it justifies a claim like resurrection.
correct, but because we base everything off of what's in the Bible, and like I said, it's been used to prove things that have actually existed. Why are we limiting ourselves to the
Why
resurrection?
would I? Okay, so for example, right, if a history book had everything in it that was correct, right, and then you specifically just had one claim in it say that that was wrong, right, like pigs flew off the ground, would you believe it?
No. I
No,
wouldn't
why
believe
not?
A better example is this: the Homer describes, the Trojan War, right? Troy was a real place, right? We know where Troy is. We can go and visit it today, but yet we don't believe that Zeus and Aphrodite and Ares were actually fighting on the battlefield, do we?
Or another one is like in Marvel movies, right? You see in the one movie where they're in like New York. New York's a real place, right? But that does not justify that Iron Man actually exists.
Of course, but us as humans, we know that we invented these things from the start. We know that these things are fictional characters because we made them ourselves during this time. Christianity has been something that's been now for,
Wait, what
2000.
about my example?
Sorry, I was just reading something. Could you say your example again?
Homer came 400 years prior to Jesus. He wrote about the Trojan War, a war that we know did happen. We know where Troy is.
Yeah.
We know that there was a place called Mycenae. We know all these different things. But yet, do you believe that Zeus and Hera and Aphrodite and Ares were on the battlefield fighting, and that a man named Achilles, who couldn't die but be shot in his heel, that he existed and everything? See
Yeah.
that's the problem, is you're arguing for age, but my book is older, so why not believe in my book?
Yeah, well, first of all, none of the Greek now actually believe in these figures. They're all mythical stories that the Greek acknowledge themselves, while still the Christians up to now understand that these books is something that they believe in, compared to what once the Greek believed to be Zeus.
Well,
and his other
one, there
gods.
are people who still believe in the Greek gods. I've met some of them, but two, whether or not whether or not a belief system falls out of favor doesn't mean that it's untrue, right? If people stop believing in Jesus Christ, does that mean that it's untrue now?
No, not exactly. It would depend
Exactly.
on the way that
So your
shows.
point is moot.
Well, the thing is, if I was born in a time where not many people believed in Jesus, obviously it'd be hard for me to, what's it called, indulge or have the curiosity to check on what Christianity is. When you have an overall consensus of, 1/8 or 2/8 of the world, I'm not sure, that follow Christianity, it piques more interest than to other religions that are less popular. That's why you still have Islam and Hinduism that are very popular because they are, they're well popular in the world. So that's why we still have them to this day. So
Yeah, but what's that have to do with whether or not God exists? Like, I don't understand your point. Like, just because somebody believes something, whether in large numbers, doesn't mean that it's true.
yeah, of course not. But I'm saying it sparks interest at the beginning for you to want to research something. If overall majority of people, you grew up in a society where an overall majority of people say, this, for example, I don't know. I'm trying to give an example. Let's say pigs fly, right? This is a stupid example, but pigs fly. If most people in your town, whatever, said, yeah, pigs do fly, right? You'd be keen on wanting to see, okay, how is this possible? But if an overall consensus of people overall say pigs don't fly, you're not going to have any interest on wanting to learn whether or not pigs fly. Does that make sense?
I understand your logic, but again, how does that connect with whether or not God exists? Because as I said, just because there's a consensus among the public that they believe in a certain thing doesn't mean that the thing itself is real. Just because like, as I said, for example, Islam is the fastest growing religion and will probably one day outpace Christianity. That doesn't mean Allah and Muhammad were correct.
Of course. And at the end of the day, it's not 100% proof based on any religion, including Christianity. But I believe that there has to be obviously some proof that can be found for you to be able to believe in something. And going back to the point that Parker said, hence is why I, take the historical information that's in these books for me to indulge in something and believe in this. Meanwhile, if you were, for example, let me put it like this: would you be more inclined or not inclined? Would it be more logical to follow, Christianity or the Greek mythology right now? What are the higher chances?
It would be
that
more
one-
reasonable for me to believe in Greek mythology than believing in Christianity, and I genuinely believe that.
So you're saying that there's more historical data showing about
Historical data
and Jesus?
doesn't
It doesn't matter when we're talking about logic.
Yeah. In fact, I would argue that the Greek gods, in terms of their logical consistency,
Are
actually
more
makes
likely
more
to-
sense.
yeah.
Because
Yeah.
the Greek gods are like capricious, they're mean, they're jealous, they don't give a shit about humans, they just do whatever the fuck they want, and it matches the real world. Like, it explains why natural events happen. It explains why grape happens. It explains why all these bad things happen because their gods are not like all loving beings. They are like us, because and it makes an entire sense. I'm not saying it's correct. I'm just saying the reason why their gods made sense is because they reflect us. Whereas,
Like logically, when we say make sense,
yeah,
I mean logically.
yeah. Whereas, well, I mean, even their stories, right? I mean, you can read the Greek myths, right? And they explain things, right? Now, obviously, they're not true, but they have good explanatory power in terms of like religious sensibilities. Whereas there's many things within Christianity that don't logically make sense and also don't have good explanatory power, such as where does evil come from, things like that. People have been throwing themselves over cliffs trying to figure out, where evil comes from. Whereas like the Greek gods, the Norse gods, the pagan gods can explain it pretty easily.
Okay, so going back to then what you said, you believe that George Washington or Abraham Lincoln existed, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, what proves?
I also believe in crucifixion. I just don't believe in resurrection.
Okay, so what proofs do you need for something to be factual in terms of historical events?
A probability. So for example, George Washington, we have documents written by him. I'm pretty sure we have his birth record, like we have like a baptism record. We have his teeth. We have his hair. We know where he's buried. I can go and visit where he's buried. We have written accounts from him, from people who are around him, from people after him, the people that buried him. We have so much more data. And same thing for Lincoln. We have pictures of Lincoln. We have photos of him. We have an entire corpus of literature around him. Not to mention that we have pictures of the people who were around him. I don't need faith to believe that that George Washington or Abraham Lincoln existed, because George Washington or Abraham Lincoln didn't claim to do any miracles. When people tell me George Washington never told a lie, I don't believe that, right? Because George Washington was human. And I'm sure as hell that like he did tell a lie. Or George Washington, when he chopped down the famous tree and everything, right? That doesn't matter to me because that's a folk tale. It doesn't matter. What matters is, yes, he was alive. He was a general. He was our first president, and he died. That's it.
Okay, but so then you wouldn't take written accounts of these
No,
historical
I
figures?
do. We don't disagree that Jesus existed. I don't disagree that Jesus existed. I believe that there was a man named Jesus who was born in Nazareth, who was a traveling type of preacher who was preaching the end of times, and then he ran into the Jewish authorities, and he was crucified under Pontius Pilate.
Okay,
That's what I
why
believe.
do you
But
believe these things?
because one, the evidence is overwhelming in my opinion that Jesus was a real person, and it makes sense that the things that I listed have historical backing and don't need miracle claims to verify. We know that Pontius Pilate existed. We know when he was prefect. We know from Paul that he was definitely crucified. We know all these things, right? None of what I said has any miracle value. I didn't mention any miracle value, right? I didn't mention the birth to a virgin. I didn't mention any of the miracles. I didn't mention him rising on the third day. None of that. I mentioned the bare bones historical facts.
Okay,
Those I agree with.
okay, so the facts that you're using, right, to account for that he was a man, just not the resurrection part and everything, what historical evidence are you using to claim this?
The Gospels themselves.
Okay, but the
Paul.
Gospels also talk about the resurrection.
Once again, I'm talking about what non-miracle claims, because you would have to agree that if you start verifying miracle claims, then we have to give miracle claims to everybody else. We have to say that Muhammad likely also did miracle claims. We have to say that Buddha also did miracle claims. That freaking Achilles had miracle
What does
claims,
the
right?
Quran say about miracles of Muhammad?
Muhammad. Well, I mean, Muhammad flew on a winged horse to go
Was that the
to
Quran or the Hadith?
probably the Hadith, but still, I mean, God speaking directly to Muhammad is a miracle because we can't test it, right? We're taking its word.
Mm-hmm.
That's a miracle. So when God is in the cave, or when Muhammad is in the cave, and God says, "Write, write, write," and Muhammad says, "I can't write," then we're taking that on its value. But that's not a historical fact to me. Do I believe that Muhammad heard something or believed something and then told his people? Yes, I believe that. But that's not a miracle value.
Okay. So I think the problem with that is it's pretty much cherry picking what you want out of the book. So it's either this is good because it aligns with, it makes sense, but this because it's supernatural doesn't align with us. It doesn't make sense. So it's either you can have balance of both, but it gets to a certain point, like Parker said, are you going, if you see a book of history, you read a book of history, and there's one thing wrong about it, are you going to say no to the full thing? You can't say no to the full
No,
thing. There's some things.
we cherry pick because history cannot and should not um, evaluate miracle claims, because once you start evaluating miracle claims for your chosen faith, then we have to start evaluating them for all other faiths, and there's no reason why Christ gets a preferential treatment whereas Muhammad doesn't, or Buddha doesn't, or any other figure, or the great emperors of Rome. There's a famous story told by Tacitus, the same person who talked about Jesus, by the way, who told of the Emperor Vespasian going before a beggar, and the beggar was blind, and he said, "Great emperor, great God, heal my blindness." And what did he do? He spit into the mud and made like a paste, and he rubbed it on the guy's eye, and the guy became like not blind anymore. That same story is very similar to a story told in the a Gospel of John.
Yeah. And which one came first?
How do we evaluate?
Which one came first?
It depends. The Gospel of John was probably written circa 90 AD. Tacitus probably wrote around that time too. But it doesn't matter who came first, right?
Well,
How do I evaluate whether Jesus did it or whether this Roman emperor did it? Right? There's no evidence either way. Both people are saying the same thing, but we as historians, or not like we, but like historians cannot make that value judgment. All they can say is this is a story that is being told, not that it's true.
So actually, if I'm wrong, you can correct me. But I mean, obviously, well, to my faith, it'd be the John's story first. But the story that Tacitus told again, if I'm correct, of course, was after the gospel
It
or the
doesn't matter
manuscripts
when it
of
was
John.
told. I'm saying the very event, right? My point wasn't when it was told. My point was that both have similar stories. And when you evaluate one story, you cannot give preferential treatment to one over the other simply because one of them is your God. Because that's not how history works. We don't evaluate history that way. And so what I do is I say both of them are just telling stories, right? They're just making claims, but their truth value cannot be looked at. I cannot prove whether or not Jesus did it or whether or not this Roman emperor did it, and it doesn't matter to me.
So if I wrote a book and then you copied the same book that I wrote, who has validity of authorship? If I wrote it first.
That's not what happened here. Tacitus did not write for well, one, Tacitus didn't have the Gospel of John to like go from. And stories about Roman emperors spitting into the mud and like curing blindness is very common, by the way. I mean, this is not the first one. I only mention it because it's one of the most famous ones, right? People spitting spit as a form of medicine to like cure blindness has been thought of for thousands of years. It's not new, right? So it's not surprising that Jesus would spit in the mud or that the emperor would like spit in the mud. It makes sense historically. But you would only know that if you read the great works and the great medical treatises that have existed for hundreds, if not thousands of years, even before Jesus.
So blind people would get cured, or people thought blind people could get cured if someone took mud and spit on it, and then
Once again, it doesn't matter to me whether it's true because it's not true. I'm evaluating your claims about historical accuracy. It doesn't matter because we can't evaluate it. Like I can't evaluate whether or not Jesus did it or whether or not this a Roman guy did it. I'm saying it's outside of the purview of history.
Yeah, but then it goes back to the same point that I made already. It's like you want to take some accounts of scripture as evidence of Jesus existing up to the point that it gets to the miracles of things. Then it's invalid.
Because we don't accept any miracles. You accept miracles.
Okay, but why do you accept then all?
Why don't we
other
accept?
accounts?
Because he just told you. Then we'd have to accept them with other religions.
I just explained it.
Yeah, but
literally
you
just
use
explained it.
other religious sources as well to find the same amount of similar historical data that you do with the Bible. Because I promise you, there's not another book that shows that more amount of historical data that the Bible shows.
Wait, that's not true. There is
Okay, what book?
modern books are more
No, I'm
historical.
talking about religious books. My apologies.
Wait, hold on. You don't think that the Quran doesn't have historical places in it and doesn't name like and like have history and everything?
I'm saying, does it have more than the Bible?
Well, it depends. I mean, yes, you're combining the Old Testament with the New Testament, and the Old Testament has some history, but the a New Testament also has some history. But again, I'm okay making historical claims about things that we can verify. The miracle claims cannot be verified. They are outside of the historical method.
Okay.
They're outside of it. I'm not cherry picking. I apply that to every text. I don't care what it is. If the text makes a claim to a miracle or claim to some kind of divine thing, I say, oh, history can't evaluate that. Like, I'm out.
Mm-hmm.
So I apply that universally.
So what do you use to verify the Gospels of Mark, Luke, and John for evidence of Jesus' existence?
Okay.
No, just the Gospels themselves. What do you need to run down for them to be true?
Okay. Well, I want to point this out, and Parker can talk. This is not like a history class. I'm not going to go through with you why I think the Gospels are accurate and this and not. I'm saying that the Gospels themselves provide us with bare bones information about a man named Jesus, because we have to rely on accounts of people, and we look at the Gospels plus Paul plus other Roman writers plus all of this stuff going around during the first century, and we put it together. Okay, and as I said, we can agree that Luke and Matthew agree on some things about how Jesus was born. They have very why disagreements. Mark has some things too, and so we can just go on and on and on and on until we build what is a plausible historical case. I still think Jesus did exist, and as I said, what I said was the bare bones historical facts. But I made nothing about miracle claims. That is your burden, and
Yeah.
simply saying, well, these are historical documents, that does not prove miracles at all.
Okay. So, with that being said, pretty much then you have to accept the fact that Matt, Luke, John were crazy, that they only thought of these things that were true, but then they are eyewitness. No, they are eyewitnesses to miracles being done that also correlate with different parts of the Gospels that they match each other. So
Yeah, they
well,
match each other because they copied each other. Mark came first, Matthew came next, Luke came third, and they copied each
Mhm.
other.
Okay, so then you have to also say that the Quran copied the Bible then, if that's your claim.
Yes, the Quran obviously had biblical influences. I don't deny that at all. I don't think that the Quran is a divine text. And
Why
so
not?
therefore when they talk about, when Muhammad gives his spin about, about Jesus not being crucified, right? Well, that's a historical claim that I can evaluate. It's wrong because the weight of history is on the side of Jesus being crucified. But why did they believe that? Maybe because that was going around at the time about, about like a Jesus not being crucified, because how can you crucify a God and stuff? It just makes sense, right? That's my point. It just makes sense. And so I apply it to all texts.
But do you have proof that the Bible was in the Arabian Peninsula at the time?
The Bible itself?
Yeah.
I mean, probably not a text. Oh, sorry. I don't know who that was sent to. I can't see it. Is that to me? Oh, thank you so much for the jet. Thank you so much. The Bible probably wasn't in a text form, but it was told by word of mouth. They had stories about Jesus, right? And probably there was even like Gnostic tales and things like that going around, which is probably one of the reasons why Jesus is not crucified, because there was like a Gnostic tradition of Christ not being crucified. But again, this has nothing to do with whether or not God exists. I'm sorry, it has nothing to do with God. This is all interesting, and I'm sure Parker is loving what I'm talking about. But this is not proving anything about about God existing. All you're proving is my point that a man named Jesus existed. Great.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
Let's move on.
Erica,
go
thank you
back-
so much for the flying jets. Thank you so much, Erica. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
I'll go back to that point, just because I don't want to get off topic. But to answer if they knew about Jesus and all these things at the time, before the Quran was revealed to them, they actually had various polytheistic religions in their tribe area. So there's no actual proof that they knew about Jesus at the time.
You don't think stories about Jesus were being propagated through that? This was 700 or about 700 years
600.
after Jesus. You don't think stories about him were being like told throughout the land?
But do you know that there was no Christianity over there, right?
There were Christians.
No, there
Muhammad
weren't.
talks about Christians. He says, "I know Christians."
But there
He
were no
says-
Christians in the
He
Quraysh
calls them the
tribe
people
at
of the
time
book.
then. Yeah, but there was no
500
there
years.
was no,
Thank you.
there was no Christians in the Quraysh tribe that he was, or in the area that he was in. They were all polytheist religions. So I just wanted to touch on that. There was actually no Bible or text or any of that where he was at.
I'm sorry, I can't do it anymore.
Brain
Dude,
hurting.
yeah, dude, my brain hurts. Push the fest crown. Like, honestly, this might be worse than the Trumpers. I'm not gonna lie. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
brother.
bad.
the cognitive dissonance is unbelievable. Yo, what's up? How old are you?
40.
To level up. Do you think the Christian God exists?
So here's my take on this. Of course, I believe the Christian God exists. Now, this is just my belief, right? So I've been listening to the lives. I've listened to you before, Parker, and I'm listening to this guy rocking before and making great arguments.
So
What it comes down to is really just personal belief, right? And what I think as a man living in this world, I say to myself, how is it any different than living like in a swamp, in a forest? And what type of animal do you think you are? And what other animals do you see around you? I look at it from that broader perspective of things, right? I don't try to go down to the Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. I believe in that. I believe in the Gospels. I believe in the way the Gnostic texts were built and put together, the Dead Sea Scrolls. I understand that whole when they put everything together in probably like the 2nd century, the current Bible. The way I look at it now is that you have to believe in something, or if you don't believe in anything, you'll fall for anything, right? Like that little phrase right there. What I think the biggest example would be, to help this example, would be the Civil War in the 1800s in the United States, right? And that came down to a fundamental difference between those that believed in slavery and those that did not. One of the things that was primarily based on that was based on whether they believed in God or they did not. Now, you talk about whether they believed in slavery or not. Well, the North believed in God and the South did not. So I say to myself, and I say to those that bring up this argument about whether the Christian God exists, whether Krishna exists, whether Muhammad really exists, what you're bringing this conversation into is essentially you're prepared for civil war. Because there are enough people in the world, billions, that believe that a God exists, and there's definitely at least a billion that don't. My question would be, I'm not trying to prove to you that the Christian God exists, because if you don't believe he exists, then you don't. That's your fundamental belief in this life. My question would be, whether are you prepared to go to civil war for your belief? And that is a fundamental question here. That is where the world is coming down to. You have about 8 billion people that just simply have each and every one of their own opinions on things. And I say to each and every one that listens, are you prepared to go to civil war for your beliefs? Now, I believe that the Christian God does exist. I believe in the text. I believe in the miracles. I believe that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John all gave historical account and died for that fundamental account. You have to understand that these Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John and the disciples all died by being beheaded, hung upside down on the cross, burned alive for their belief that Jesus existed. Jesus died, he crucified, and he rose again after 3 days. They went to their graves believing this. Now, that's fundamentally where I believe. I'm not going to sit here and try and shove religion down your throat, talk about Trump, Kamala Harris. I think that's all bullshit today. It's all bullshit. We're talking about the actual creation of the earth, dinosaurs, creation itself, all the animals, everything that exists. And either you believe that creation was made to create, or you were believing that creation was made to be destroyed. And that comes down to living in the swamp, whether you're, let's say, a marsupial versus snakes. One or the other, you're going to say, well, you know what? I might be a marsupial and I'm sick and tired of being harassed and bothered by snakes. The marsupials are going to get together and just fucking kill all the snakes and say, we're taking over the swamp. This is our new home. We're going to clean this place out. That's really what it comes down to. It's not about trying to shove any religion down your throat. I'm not trying to say believe in Islam, believe in Christianity, believe in this or that. No. We're way past that. I think it really comes down to fundamentally whether you believe in creation or you believe in destruction.
Okay.
Did you see anything you wanted to respond to there, Matt?
That was a lot. I don't know exactly what to say. There's not going to be a civil war about versus Christianity.
Hang on a sec. Don't say there's not going to be one, because what about the Crusades? What about the Civil War in the 1800s? There are more guns in the United States than there are human beings. Roughly today.
Look, with all respect, I'm deeply confused. I'm deeply confused about what this has to do with anything about the topic. Like, yes, civil wars happen. What's your point?
If you don't believe that the Christian God exists, my question is, are you prepared to go to civil war over that?
There's not going to be a civil war over when a God exists.
Well,
I'm sorry,
that's interesting because you don't believe that, but I do.
And dude, the Crusades, bro, are you okay, man?
Yeah, of course.
Are you okay, bro?
Absolutely.
I'm not gonna fight you, dude. I think you're
no.
I'm not gonna fight you.
I don't want to fight you. The whole point is that I'm not trying to shove anything down your throat. My point is that
saying that there's going to be a civil war.
No.
Well, no, huh? Let me ask this question. I have this question. Are you saying if I start promoting atheism, or I start, like, let's say I become president and I'm an atheist and I enact atheistic policies, I don't discriminate, but I don't like religion that much. Are you saying that, like, you're going to take up the like a pew pew and just start, like, like run into the White House or
My
something?
my belief would be this: that if an atheist were elected, and an atheist did push fundamental atheist views towards the entire population, I believe
Like
that
separation of church and state.
Well, here's the thing with separation of church and state. Yes, there is supposed to be separation, but that does not mean fundamentally not believing in church and state. It's about keeping
Wait,
God
hold
out
on.
of state.
What would an atheist president have to do that would make you like, okay, I need to take up arms?
Well, see, the First Amendment guarantees religious freedom, right?
I agree.
So if you were to go and an atheist were to go in and try to fundamentally change the constitutional rights of those that believe and those do not, I believe that that president would be assassinated one way or another.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, a president can't do that, so I mean, it
Correct.
wouldn't really matter.
Correct.
But I mean, but again, it seems to me that the only ones who are pushing like indoctrination on people are like religious Christians, because they're the ones who are passing bills and laws and shit that are like putting Bibles in schools and making us pray and making
No,
us do all this
I
other
agree
shit.
with you. I agree with you. I don't think that's right either. I think that you should have the fundamental right to choose. But I think that once it gets put down to a point of whether it affects your life to a point where now you have half the population, you have to understand where we are in the country right now. We're basically a 50-50 split, right? Half the country hates the other half for fundamental reasons. And really, when you come down to it, it's basically God. So when you get to this point,
I reject that. I don't think the fundamental disagreement between Republicans and Democrats is about God. I think it's about the role of government. There are very religious Democrats and there are
like
atheistic
what?
Republicans.
The
And
leaders
they-
of our party are religious, dude.
but
Like,
the thing is, though, when you say religious Republicans or Democrats, what do you believe in calling religious? There's things in the text that say
you're cutting off your mic.
the things in the text that say, do this, do that. There are fake religious Republicans. There are fake religious Democrats. We call them rhinos. We call them dinos. Democrats in name only. Republicans in name only, right? A dino and a rhino. Those that come into office and espouse
Moon
themselves
Glow, thank you so much for
as
the
being
$10. Thank you so much.
religious and start pushing these type.
Your mic's covered again.
Yeah,
I
dude.
think that that's a falsehood. And I think that that is where we as a country and we as a people, whether you believe this or not, you need to be careful about who we elect into office. And I think that is a fundamental problem.
I agree.
With
Say
who
no to
we
Donald Trump.
elect. Well, here's the thing. You got to elect somebody, right? And voting third party and writing somebody in, it's never going to work. The way the Democratic Party set up the way
How did we get here?
because it comes down to whether you believe in God or not, right? And the way
It doesn't. I'm sorry, but like when I went into the voting booth, God was not on my mind. Like I didn't. I was
But you
thinking
still
about
got to
God.
pick somebody for president, right? You have to pick somebody, and you can't
Yeah,
just write in your
and I was-
name or somebody random.
and
The
I was
Democratic
picking
Party
between-
put somebody, and the Republican Party put somebody. So if
Wait, you know
don't
what I'm going to
choose
say? I'm going
one-
to say right now. I believe Donald Trump is not a real Christian. I think Kamala Harris is a far more Christian person than
Okay.
Donald Trump is.
Okay, I could
Therefore,
agree with-
we have a non-Christian who will take office very soon.
I agree with that. Now, here's the thing about the presidency. The presidency don't mean shit. The way the system is set up is that the people in Congress decide the rules, okay? The presidency is simply a stage for the most popular person to stand on. Now, whether Trump stands there, Kamala Harris, okay, we can argue that they're Christians or not Christians. Who supports the Republican Party and the Democratic Party? And frankly, I believe there are
My head
more.
actually hurts today,
I
dude.
believe
My
there
head-
are
it
more
hurts so
real
bad.
Christians in the Republican Party than there are in the Democratic Party.
Oh my
That is
fucking
my
God,
belief.
dude. Cool, dude. You want a cookie?
No, I'm eating Twizzlers
What
right
the
now.
fuck does that? I don't fucking care, dude. Why the hell are you telling me this, dude? What the fuck? I don't give a shit.
Okay,
Cool. You're saying that like nobody knew that.
okay,
There are more Christians within the Republican Party. Sure,
okay.
I don't care.
So what it comes down to is non-Christians versus Christians. That's really what it comes down to.
No, it doesn't.
You're
No, it doesn't.
simplifying it.
is way
you know
too
what this reminds
fucking
me of, Parker?
simplified.
It reminds me
Occam's
of like
razor, baby. It's called
Marxism. Like,
Occam's
like
razor.
it's
The
always the
simplest answer
fucking
tends to
proletariat
be the
versus
correct
a
one.
bourgeoisie.
That's the whole point of Occam's razor.
Well, tell me what Occam's razor is.
Occam's razor, a razor, is about shedding and cutting things off. So Occam was the one who created this. Occam's razor states that out of all things created equal, the most simplest answer tends to be the correct one. And you simply said it, Rock, in a
Yeah,
second.
you understand that? Like that, if you accept Occam's razor, you can dispute that God exists because God is not the simplest explanation, you fucking
Why not?
guy.
You believe that
Dude,
we fell
listen,
out of
because you
nothing?
have all knowing,
Created
all
from
powerful,
nothing?
all good is required to explain the universe.
Well, here's the thing, man. All
First,
good
that
and
no
all...
such. I could literally say that there's a fundamental particle that's every necessary property of the universe within it, and I have less commitments under my worldview than you do with yours.
Do you
Because
know
have
that
the morality, you have the text, the scripture, the miracles, all of that stuff is unnecessary in explaining why we exist.
Do you know that in the DNA code, in every single cell, that Yahweh's name is written into the DNA
Oh,
code?
That's
shut
not
the
true.
fuck up,
That's
dude.
not true.
Oh my god, man.
Yahweh is not in the DNA
Dude,
code. Where
If
this
you
came
understand
from is
zeros
so
and ones-
funny to me. Like,
Listen, I'm a computer programmer, brother. If you understand what zeros and ones are, the DNA...
show me a biologist who like says that's true.
Okay,
please.
there's four DNA subtypes, right? And they connect together to create all of our DNA.
dude,
Yeah.
I forgot. This is just like straight, like we're not even living in fucking reality, dude.
If you
Like I'm
check
actually serious. We're not even living in reality in this conversation. This is just like a fictional conversation. We
could
might
always
as
do
well
that.
talk about what superhero we like most.
Okay, there we go. Let's talk about it. I love superheroes. What superhero are you?
I was
We're all in
trolling.
the multiverse, brother. Which one are you?
This
Are you
conversation
trolling,
is
dude?
so.
I am not trolling, brother. This is real. This is real talk. We can switch the topic. Listen, brother. I ain't trying to, shove anything down your throat. I ain't trying to make anyone feel uncomfortable. I'm here for a good conversation. I like good conversation. We can all be in the multiverse, man. I love Wolverine, fucking Raiden, all these other types of fucking characters, brother. We could talk about Sega Genesis, PlayStation, whatever you want to talk about, man. I want to be flying around in an Iron Man suit. I ain't doing that right now. We're talking about fucking God and Trump and Kamala Harris.
Hello,
That's some stupid ass
darkness, my
shit.
old friend.
I'd love to be in the Marvel comic universe, brother, flying around fighting demons and fighting
I come to
superheroes and
talk
doing all
with
that
you
shit.
again
I'd love to do that.
because a vision softly creeping to see while I was sleeping. I'm lost for words. I need a cookie.
I'm sorry, dude. My brain actually.
I actually have a headache now. I'm not joking.
I'm actually not
actually have a
joking.
headache.
I do too. I'm not trolling. Dude,
I don't know if I
why
need
it's
more
been-
water or
I don't
what,
know
but-
why it's been so insufferable. Like my brain actually hurts.
What
chat.
was
Like,
your following percentage, Parker? Mine was
70.
84%.
I know it's 70-80%.
84.
Like do I go to a different account or like what do I do?
I don't know. I honestly don't know what to do because, like, I mean, 2.8 is pretty good, but it's totally up to you. I know that you want more. But
You know it's following
I don't think.
glitched. Like
I know absolutely. I
it's
know,
like-
but your other accounts aren't going to do any better. I think you tried that
I
once
don't
and it
even
didn't
know.
work.
I don't even know. I don't know what to do, chat. Like I'm actually like lost for what to do. It's not about the topic, it's totally about just like fucking just how the lives are set up in terms of following percent. Like it's making it insufferable.
It is. Well, we can bring. There's
I think it's
someone in
partial
chat.
I think it's partial to the
Okay.
topic though. I mean like
Probably.
that's probably true to some degree.
Well, if you want to switch over to Trump, you can. But there's one person in chat who wants to come up, and I think they're a Christian. Maybe they can actually get us back on track if you want to try
I
it once.
don't even want to do that anymore.
Okay, sounds good to me.
I don't know what to do.
People like this topic. It's just
I think I
I don't
need a
know.
second to like just like chill and think about what to do.
sounds like a good plan.
Yeah, I'll be right back, everyone. I'm gonna think about what to do. Just give me a minute, everyone.
I'll
Give
go
me, like,
live
five
and,
to
and
five-
take people company.
No, I was
you
gonna
can take as
call
long
you.
as you want.
Give me.
Oh, you're
give
gonna
me,
call
like,
me?
5 to
Okay,
10. Yeah, give me like 5 to 10 minutes, chat, and I'll figure it out.
All right.
All right.
Bye, Parker.
Love y'all.
Bye, chat.